You want to go to college? Good. Figure it out yourself, my mother said, while sliding a $120,000 tuition check across the table to my little sister. Same table, same dinner, same parents, different daughter. 9 years later, I stood in the back of my sister's wedding. A wedding paid for by the same parents who couldn't spare a dime for my future. My mother scanned the room and whispered to my father, "Why does it feel like something's missing?" Before anyone could answer, the groom turned pale. He looked at me, then at Julia, then back at me, and he said one word that silenced 200 guests. What that word was, and what happened next, destroyed a wedding, a family's lie, and a 9-year silence, all in under 4 minutes. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're watching from. My name is Paige Connolly. I'm 27 years old. And this is not a revenge story. This is a survival story that happens to end with justice. Now, let me take you back 9 years, to the dinner that changed everything. I grew up in a white colonial house on Maple Ridge Lane in West Hartford, Connecticut. 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, a lawn my father mowed every Saturday like clockwork. From the outside, we looked like a family that had it together. From the inside, well, that depends on which daughter you ask. My mother, Donna Connolly, had a system. It wasn't written down anywhere, but everyone in the house understood it. Julia was the investment, I was the overhead. Julia got piano lessons, I got hand-me-down textbooks. Julia got a new dress for every school dance. I got told to make do with what you have, and my mother didn't hide it. She introduced us at neighborhood barbecues like a product line. "This is my daughter Julia. She's going to do great things." Then she'd gesture vaguely in my direction. "And this is Paige." No prediction, no pride, just a name. The refrigerator was the museum of Julia's life. Cheerleading photos, honor society certificates, a dried corsage from homecoming taped to the freezer handle, every inch covered. One morning, sophomore year, I stuck my honor roll certificate up with a magnet right in the center. By the time I got home from school, it was gone. The fridge was getting cluttered, my mother said, not looking up from her magazine. My father, Richard, was a different kind of problem. He wasn't cruel, he was absent. Emotionally, strategically absent. He'd catch me in the hallway sometimes, away from my mother's earshot, and squeeze my shoulder. "I'm proud of you, kid." 5 words. Always whispered, always when Donna wasn't looking. As if being proud of me was something that required secrecy. I told myself it would change when I got into college. I got in, with a scholarship that covered half. I just needed them to cover the other half. What happened at that dinner table is something I replay in my head to this day. May 2008. I was 18. Senior year was ending in 11 days, and I had a plan. I'd printed everything out: scholarship letter, tuition breakdown, a 4-year budget I'd built on a spreadsheet, income from part-time work, estimated expenses, the gap I needed them to fill. $62,000 over 4 years. I'd rehearsed my pitch in the bathroom mirror 3 times. Dinner was roast chicken. Julia sat across from me, scrolling her phone. My father cut his meat in silence. I waited until my mother finished her second glass of wine, then set the folder on the table. "I got into UConn," I said. "Half scholarship. I just need help with the rest." My mother didn't open the folder. "Paige, we've talked about this." "We haven't, actually. Not once." "You need to learn independence." She said it like a diagnosis. "The real world doesn't hand you things." I pointed out the obvious. "You're paying Julia's full tuition at Syracuse. Julia's situation is different." My mother folded her napkin. Precise. Unhurried. "She has potential that needs nurturing. You're more resilient." I looked at my father. He stared at his plate. His fork didn't move. He said nothing. Julia stirred her water glass. Didn't look up. Didn't say a word in my defense. Not one. "This discussion is over," my mother said. "If you want it bad enough, you'll find a way. That's what strong people do." I gathered my papers. My hands shook. I wouldn't cry in front of them. I wouldn't give her that. Later in the hallway, my father caught my arm. I thought, finally he'd say something. Your mother has her reasons, he said. Just give it time. Then he walked away. Back to the living room. Back to the television. Back to the version of peace that required my silence. That night I packed one suitcase. I had $340 in my savings account, and I made a decision I haven't reversed in 9 years. 5:14 a.m. The kitchen was dark. I set my house key on the counter next to the coffee maker, the one my mother ran every morning at 6:15, so she'd find it first. No note. I didn't have anything left to explain. The garage light was on. My father sat in his Buick, engine off, hands on the wheel. He saw me through the windshield. I saw him. He didn't open the door. I didn't knock on the glass. We just looked at each other for 3 seconds that felt like a year. Then I turned and walked to the bus stop on Farmington Avenue. Campus was 90 minutes away. My dorm room had a thin mattress, a metal desk, and a window that didn't close all the way. No sheets, no blankets. I'd forgotten mine. I slept in my jacket that first night. By the end of the week, I had 3 jobs: dishwasher at Fratelli's, an Italian restaurant off Main Street, overnight cashier at a Sunoco station on Route 44, cleaning crew at the residence halls on weekends. My schedule was a jigsaw puzzle with no picture on the box. 4 hours of sleep here, a 90-minute nap there. I ate whatever Fratelli's was throwing out at closing. 2 weeks in, I called my mother. I don't know why. Maybe I thought distance had softened something. You made your choice, she said. Don't call to make me feel guilty. She hung up. 7 seconds. That was the whole conversation. I saved her number under a new name. Do not answer. That evening, a text came through from Julia. I stared at it for a long time. Mom says you're being dramatic. Just come home and apologize. So that was the story she was telling. I wasn't the daughter they abandoned. I was the daughter who left. The difficult one. The dramatic one. I didn't know it then, but that phone call was the last time I'd speak to my mother for nearly a decade. And when we finally stood face to face again, she wouldn't recognize the person I'd become. Freshman year nearly broke me. I fell asleep in organic chemistry twice. Spilled boiling water on my left hand during a dinner rush at Fratelli's. 2nd-degree burn, 3 fingers. Wrapped it in gauze from the gas station first aid kit and went to my morning lecture 40 minutes later. My GPA hovered at 2.9, dangerously close to losing the scholarship that was keeping me enrolled. Professor Alan Whitfield noticed. He taught my Intro to Health Sciences seminar. Silver-haired, bow-tied, the kind of man who actually reads student papers instead of skimming them. After class one Tuesday, he asked me to stay. You're exhausted, he said. Not a question. I gave him the short version. He didn't pity me. He pulled out a folder of internal grants and research assistantships. You're too smart to burn out before sophomore year, he said. Let me help you find a way that doesn't cost your hands or your sleep. He got me into a paid research position in his lab. It wasn't much, $400 a month, but it replaced the overnight shifts at Sunoco. Meanwhile, my mother was busy. Thanksgiving came. I wasn't invited, though I learned later that Donna told the entire family I'd been asked and refused. She doesn't want to see us, my mother reportedly said, dabbing her eyes with a napkin. We've tried everything. My Aunt Helen, Donna's younger sister, called me the week after. Your mother is heartbroken, Paige. Why are you doing this to her? I tried to explain. Helen cut me off. Donna would never do that. You always were the difficult one. The line went dead. And just like that, I lost my mother's side of the family too. That same week, Julia posted a photo on Facebook. A brand new Audi A4 parked in our parents' driveway, a red bow on the hood. Caption, Best parents ever. My mother's comment underneath, anything for my baby girl. 87 likes. I took a screenshot, not out of bitterness, out of clarity. That was the night I stopped hoping they'd change and started building a life that didn't need them to. Lena Novak sat next to me in Biology 201 on the first day of sophomore year. She had dark hair pulled back in a rubber band, circles under her eyes deeper than mine, and a thermos of coffee the size of a small fire extinguisher. You look how I feel, she said. Thanks. It's a compliment. It means you're still showing up. Lena was pre-med, Her parents had emigrated from the Czech Republic when she was 6. They ran a dry cleaning shop in Bridgeport and couldn't afford tuition any more than mine could, the difference being hers actually wanted to help. They just couldn't. My parents could. They just chose not to. She became the first person I told the whole story to. All of it. The dinner, the check, the Audi, the Facebook post. I told her on a bench outside the science building at 11 at night, both of us eating gas station sandwiches because neither of us could afford the dining hall. Lena didn't flinch. She didn't offer sympathy. She wiped mustard off her chin and said, "You don't owe them a redemption arc, Paige. You owe yourself a life." I carried those words for years. That semester I started writing a research paper for Dr. Whitfield's lab. 12 pages on data applications and patient record management. Small clinic systems, workflow optimization, interoperability gaps. I wrote most of it between midnight shifts, in the staff break room at Fratelli's, between loads of industrial dishes. It was dry, technical, and deeply unsexy. But it was the first thing I'd ever built that felt completely mine. Dr. Whitfield read the draft in one sitting. "This could be something," he said. "Not just a paper. Something real." That paper, those 12 pages I wrote between midnight shifts, would eventually become the foundation of something I couldn't have imagined. But that part comes later. One night, sorting through junk mail, I found a forwarded email from my father. No subject line, no greeting, just 7 words. "I hope you're eating enough. Dad." He didn't ask where I was, didn't offer help, didn't mention my mother. Just 7 words floating in digital silence. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop and went back to work. The end of sophomore year almost took me under. Fratelli's closed. The owner retired, the building sold. Just like that, 40% of my income disappeared overnight. I sat on my dorm bed and did the math 3 times, hoping the numbers would change. They didn't. I had enough savings for 6 weeks of rent on my shared room. After that, nothing. I picked up my phone, scrolled to Do Not Answer. My thumb hovered over the green button for 11 seconds. I counted. I put the phone down. Instead, I walked to the campus job board and signed up for 2 more gigs: tutoring freshmen in statistics and freelance data entry for a local insurance office on weekends. My schedule compressed to 3 hours of sleep a night. Some mornings, I couldn't remember driving to campus. Lena started leaving granola bars in my backpack without telling me. Meanwhile, Julia was living her semester abroad in Florence. I know this because her Instagram existed, even though I'd unfollowed her. The algorithm didn't care about my boundaries. A photo surfaced on my feed at 2 in the morning. Julia on a terrace overlooking the Arno. Glass of wine in hand, golden hour light on her face. Caption: "Living my best life. #grateful." My mother had reposted it with her own words. "My daughter, conquering the world." I was sitting in the basement laundry room of my residence hall. The overhead light buzzed. The heat had been out for 3 days. My fingers were cracked from dish soap and cold water. Same parents, same blood, different worlds. Then, a lifeline. Dr. Whitfield called me into his office. Not to warn me, to hand me a letter. I'd been selected for a competitive summer research fellowship, fully funded. Housing, stipend, meals, everything covered for 10 weeks. "You earned this," he said, "not because of your situation, because of your work." That summer program saved my academic career. But more importantly, it introduced me to a network of people in healthcare technology, people who saw what I could build, not what I came from. One of those connections would lead me to a name I wouldn't hear again for years, not until I was standing in the back of a wedding I was never supposed to attend. I graduated summa cum laude on a Sunday in May. The stadium held 4,000 people. None of them were mine. Lena stood in the bleachers with a handmade sign that said Dr. Connolly, eventually, in crooked purple letters. She screamed my name when I crossed the stage. One person, louder than a whole family would have been. We took a photo outside, just the 2 of us, caps tilted, grinning into Lena's phone. No parents in the background, no bouquet, no dinner reservation afterward. Lena drove us to a diner on Route 9, and we split a plate of cheese fries and called it a celebration. I got a job within a month. Entry-level software analyst at a small health tech firm outside Hartford. 12 employees, cramped office, terrible coffee. But I learned fast, wrote code, fixed systems nobody else wanted to touch, got promoted once, then again. By 24, I was sketching something of my own on napkins and spreadsheets. A platform to manage patient data for small clinics, the ones too small for enterprise software, but too complex for paper records. The idea that had started as 12 pages in Dr. Whitfield's lab had grown teeth. I used my savings and a small SBA loan to get it off the ground. Named it MedBridge Solutions. The first year, I had 2 clients and a folding table for a desk. I incorporated under my married name, well, almost married. I'd been engaged briefly in my mid-20s to a man named David Alcott. The relationship didn't survive the 80-hour weeks, but by the time we split, all my business filings, my professional reputation, and my conference badges read Paige Alcott. I never changed them back. It felt like mine by then. A name I'd earned in boardrooms, not inherited at a dinner table where I wasn't welcome. Then one evening, my phone rang. A Connecticut area code I hadn't seen in 6 years. "Hey," Julia said. "It's me." "I know. Mom doesn't know I'm calling." "What do you need, Julia?" "A favor. A financial one." "How much?" $8,000. I'll pay you back." "I can't ask Mom and Dad. They can't know about this." "For what?" "It's complicated." "No." "You don't even—" "No." She hung up. 30 minutes later, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I picked up before I could think. "How dare you refuse your sister?" My mother's voice, colder than I remembered. "After everything this family has done." I pressed the red button, set the phone face down on the counter, and stood there, replaying what Julia had said 30 minutes earlier. "Mom doesn't know I'm calling." So either my mother had suddenly developed telepathy, or my sister had lied to me within the first 5 seconds of our first conversation in 6 years. Some things never change. Made myself a cup of tea, and went back to work. I didn't know what the $8,000 was for, not then. But when I found out, years later in the worst possible way, it explained everything Julia had been hiding. Donna didn't take rejection quietly. She never did. Within a week, my phone started ringing. Numbers I hadn't seen in years. Cousins, family friends, people I barely remembered from childhood holiday dinners. All with the same script. "Paige, your mother is devastated." "Paige, how could you turn your back on Julia?" She'd called every one of them. Built a fresh narrative from scratch. Paige has money now. Paige refused to help her own sister. Paige has become cold and selfish since she left. Aunt Helen called. "Your mother is crying every night because of you." "Did she cry when I was working 3 jobs at 18? "That was your choice." "Exactly. And this is also my choice. Goodbye, Aunt Helen." Then came the Facebook post. Long, performative, dripping with carefully constructed sorrow. Some children forget where they come from. A mother's heart can only break so many times. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. 142 likes. Julia's comment sat right at the top. "Love you, Mom. I'm here for you. Always." A perfect duet. The devoted daughter and the wounded mother, staged for an audience that only ever heard one side. I saw the post. I didn't react. Didn't comment. I blocked both accounts, closed my laptop, and went back to debugging a client integration that was due in the morning. A few days later, Lena called me on her break from the hospital. She was halfway through her residency by then. "Hey, random question. Julia's LinkedIn says she's a senior healthcare administrator, but I looked her up on the state licensing registry last night. Nothing. No license, no record. Maybe she hasn't updated it? Or maybe there's nothing to update." I filed that away. I didn't think about it again. I was too busy building something real to chase someone else's lie. I could have fought back. Could have posted my own version, corrected the record, aired the receipts. But I had a company to build. And the best response to a false narrative isn't a counter-narrative. It's a life they can't edit. 26. 2 years after that phone call, MedBridge Solutions closed its Series A round. $4.2 million in funding, 28 employees, a real office in downtown Boston with actual desks and coffee that didn't taste like engine cleaner. I still drove a Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper, still lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Somerville. I didn't build this company to impress anyone, I told Lena when she asked why I hadn't upgraded. I built it because I had no safety net and no other option. That October, I was invited to speak at a healthcare technology conference in Chicago. 200 attendees, mostly hospital administrators and clinic operators. I presented MedBridge's platform, how it cut onboarding time for small practices by 60%, how it integrated with existing EHR systems without the enterprise price tag. Afterward, a man in a gray blazer introduced himself near the coffee station. Tall, confident handshake, direct eye contact. Marcus Webb. I'm CFO of Lakeview Medical Partners, a regional clinic chain. We're expanding. What you showed up there is exactly what we've been looking for. How many locations? I asked. 14, 22 by next year. That's a significant rollout. It is, which is why I want to talk numbers. Can we meet next month? We exchanged business cards. I wrote Marcus Webb, Lakeview Medical, follow-up November, in my meeting notes that night. Just a name. Just a potential deal. As I waited for my flight home at O'Hare, a notification popped on my phone. Julia Connolly has sent you a friend request on Facebook. She'd made a new account. The old one was still blocked. I stared at it for a few seconds, then tapped decline, and put my phone away. Marcus Webb. I didn't know he was about to become my sister's fiancé, or that our deal would detonate a lie my family had been building for 9 years. 6 months later, the deal with Lakeview Medical Partners was taking shape. Contract value, $2.8 million, easily the largest in MedBridge's history. My team had spent weeks on the proposal. Technical specs, implementation timelines, compliance documentation. Healthcare is heavily regulated, and every detail had to be airtight. As part of the deal, Lakeview wanted MedBridge to handle their credentialing module, the system that tracks staff licenses, certifications, and continuing education for regulatory audits. To build it properly, we needed their existing personnel records as sample data for implementation. My compliance officer requested the full staff roster with credentials listed. It was a technical requirement, not an investigation. Just data we needed to configure the system correctly. That part was routine. What wasn't routine was the envelope that arrived at my apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, cream-colored, heavy cardstock, gold embossing along the edges. I opened it standing at the kitchen counter, still holding my keys. Together with their families, Julia Connolly and Marcus Webb request the honor of your presence at their wedding. Rosewood Estate, Old Saybrook, Connecticut. Saturday, June 15th. 5 o'clock in the evening. I read it twice. Then I set it down and walked to the window and stood there for a while. Marcus Webb. The same Marcus Webb whose contract was sitting in my inbox. My sister was marrying my biggest client. I picked up the invitation again. A folded piece of notebook paper fell out from behind the RSVP card. The handwriting was shaky, slanted, small letters pressed hard into the paper. Please come. Dad. Not Donna, not Julia. Richard. He'd slipped it in like contraband. My father didn't know what I did for a living. He'd never asked, and I'd never told him. Our only communication in 9 years had been a 7-word email he never followed up on. He didn't send the invitation because he knew about Marcus or MedBridge. He sent it because, for all his failures, he still wanted both his daughters in the same room. I called Lena that night. My sister is marrying my biggest client. Silence. Does he know who you are? She asked. He knows me as the CEO of MedBridge, not as Julia's sister. Does Julia know? I don't think so. She has no idea what I do. So what are you going to do? I looked at the notebook paper. My father's handwriting. Shaky, small. The letters of a man who didn't have the courage to call, but couldn't stop himself from reaching. I'm going to go. I should have thrown the invitation away. Every rational part of me said, don't go. But my father's handwriting, on torn notebook paper, tucked behind an RSVP card like he was afraid someone would see, broke something in me I thought I'd sealed shut. I spent 2 weeks going back and forth. Lena said, if you go, go for yourself, not for them. She was right. She usually was. I decided to attend for 3 reasons. Closure, my father's note, and the fact that I needed one more face-to-face with Marcus before we finalized the contract. A wedding wasn't ideal. But nothing about this situation was ideal. I RSVP'd for two, myself and Lena, who insisted on coming. "You're not walking into that house alone," she said. "I didn't survive 4 years of med school to let you face Donna Connolly without backup." Meanwhile, the due diligence process churned along on schedule. My implementation team began running the credentialing data through our verification engine. It's a core feature of the platform, cross-referencing submitted credentials against state licensing databases and university registries. It's what the software does. It's literally the product we were selling them. The kind of paperwork that sits in someone's inbox for a week before anyone notices. The spreadsheet came back with 14 names. I scrolled through it at my desk, coffee in hand, not expecting anything unusual. Line 9, Julia Connolly, Healthcare Administrator, MS in Health Informatics, State University of New York. My stomach dropped. Not surprise exactly. Something closer to confirmation. I thought of what Lena had told me a couple of years back. Her name wasn't on the state registry. I could have flagged it. Could have said something to Marcus right then. But this was a compliance process, not a personal investigation. The protocol was clear. Verify every name on the list. No exceptions, no shortcuts, no favoritism, in either direction. I emailed my legal team. Fast-track the credential verification, the full list, standard procedure. I didn't single Julia out. I didn't have to. The process would find whatever there was to find. 3 days later, a preliminary note came back from our compliance officer. 3 names flagged for extended verification. Institutional responses may take 2 to 4 weeks. The wedding was in 18 days. The results might not arrive until after it. And I realized I wasn't just going to my sister's wedding. I was walking into a collision between 2 worlds she never expected to meet. I didn't ask which 3. I didn't need to. The wedding was in 18 days. The verification results would arrive in 14. And I realized I wasn't just going to my sister's wedding. I was walking into a collision between 2 worlds she never expected to meet. Rosewood Estate sat on 12 acres of rolling vineyard just north of the Connecticut shoreline. String lights hung in loops between old oak trees. White linen draped every surface. A string quartet played something soft and tasteful near the garden entrance. 200 chairs faced a flower-covered arch. It looked like a magazine spread. It looked like money. My parents' money. Lena and I arrived at 4:40. I wore a simple navy dress, hair down, no jewelry worth noticing. Lena wore black. "Moral support and funeral energy," she whispered. "Both apply." We'd barely made it past the welcome table when a voice cut through the ambient music. "I didn't expect to see you here." Aunt Helen. Champagne in hand. Same pinched expression she'd worn the last time she told me I was the difficult one. "I was invited," I said. "By whom?" "Does it matter? I'm here." She opened her mouth, closed it, then retreated toward a cluster of cousins near the bar. I watched her whisper something to 2 women I vaguely recognized. Both turned to look at me. Then my mother appeared. Donna Connolly moved through the crowd like a hostess at a gala. Champagne-colored dress, hair blown out, smile set to maximum wattage. She touched shoulders, kissed cheeks, laughed at things that weren't funny. When she saw me, the smile didn't drop. It froze. She crossed the lawn in 6 seconds and pulled me behind a trellis of white roses. "What are you doing here?" "Attending my sister's wedding." "You haven't been part of this family for 9 years. Whose choice was that?" Her jaw tightened. "Don't make a scene, not today." "I have no intention of making a scene, Mom." She studied me for 3 long seconds, reading me, calculating. Then she turned back to her guests, voice bright and warm as sunlight. "Paige decided to surprise us. How wonderful." She didn't touch me, didn't hug me, just folded me into her performance like a loose thread she needed to tuck away before anyone noticed. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned. My father stood behind me. His suit was a little too big. His eyes were red. He didn't say a word. He just pulled me into his arms and held on. 9 years. The first real embrace in 9 years. I went rigid for a moment. My body didn't remember how to receive this. Then I exhaled and patted his back. "Hi, Dad." He nodded into my shoulder, squeezed tighter. I felt Donna's eyes on my back the entire time my father held me. She wasn't angry that I came, she was afraid. I just didn't understand why. Not yet. Julia found me 10 minutes later. She came through the crowd in a cloud of white tulle and hairspray, her face cycling through emotions faster than she could settle on one. Shock, then calculation, then performance. She landed on performance. Paige! Oh my God, you came! She threw her arms around me in front of a dozen watching guests, her voice pitched high enough to carry. I've missed you so much! Her perfume was expensive. Her hug was hollow. She squeezed me like a prop, tight enough for the photos, loose enough to mean nothing. You look great, she said, stepping back, scanning me head to toe. Not warmth, assessment. Congratulations, Julia. Thank you. I can't believe you're here. Mom didn't tell me. She didn't know. A flicker of something crossed Julia's face. She recovered fast. My mother materialized at my elbow. Let's get you seated, Paige. Her hand closed around my arm, not gently, and steered me toward the back of the reception area. The table was tucked behind a pillar, near the catering entrance. Place cards for names I didn't recognize. People from Julia's office, plus ones without partners. The farthest seat from the head table. The farthest seat from the microphone. We didn't expect you, Donna said. So this was the only spot left. Lena sat down next to me and said nothing. She didn't need to. Her expression said everything. From the head table, my mother's voice carried across the reception as she introduced Julia to well-wishers. My daughter, the healthcare executive, she's done so well. We're so proud. My daughter, singular. A cousin leaned over to Donna. And Paige, what does she do these days? Oh, she's... A pause, a tilt of the head. Finding herself. You know how it is. Light laughter rippled across the table. A few people glanced in my direction. Lena's hand found mine under the tablecloth. Breathe. I am breathing. I've been breathing through worse than this for 9 years. At the bar, Marcus stood with a group of groomsmen, gesturing animatedly. I heard him say, loud enough to carry, wait till you meet our strategic tech partner later. She's flying in just for this. Major deal. He was talking about me. He just didn't know it yet. The speeches began after the main course. Marcus's best man went first, charming, forgettable. Then Julia's maid of honor, a sorority sister who cried on cue, polite applause, glasses raised, the rhythm of a wedding doing what weddings do. Then my mother stood up. Donna Connolly took the microphone like she'd been born holding one. She smiled at the crowd, dabbed her eyes before she'd even said a word. The performance was immaculate. I want to talk about raising a daughter, she began. My fingers tightened around my water glass. She talked about sacrifice, about late nights and early mornings, about pouring everything into Julia's future. She talked about Julia's incredible academic career, her dedication, her independence. I raised my daughter to be independent, Donna said, to chase her dreams, to never settle. Today she's marrying a man worthy of everything she's built. Independent. The word hit me like a slap, the same word she'd used to deny me everything. She continued, Julia is proof that when a family invests in their children, beautiful things happen. 200 people applauded. I didn't move. Lena's hand pressed harder against mine. Then Donna's gaze drifted across the room and landed on me. A pause, practiced, deliberate. And of course, we love all our children. She said it the way you'd add a footnote, an afterthought stapled to the bottom of a finished page. A few heads turned toward me. I kept my face still. Donna wrapped up with a grand sweep. Why does it feel like something's missing today? Oh, I think it's because our family is finally complete again. Applause. My mother returned to her seat, glowing. My father appeared at my table moments later. His hand found my shoulder. She didn't mean it like that. She meant exactly that, Dad. She always does. He opened his mouth. Nothing came. He patted my shoulder once and walked back to the head table. I wasn't going to say anything. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I was going to sit at my back of the room table, finish my water, and leave. That was the plan. That was always the plan. But then Marcus walked toward my table with a man I recognized, and the plan stopped mattering. Greg Harmon saw me first. He was Marcus's business partner. I'd met him once on a video call during contract negotiations. Stocky, red-faced, a voice that carried. He stopped mid-stride 3 feet from my table. Paige? Paige Connolly? Medbridge? Marcus turned, looked at me, then looked again. Wait. His face rearranged itself in real time. You're Paige Connolly? The Paige Connolly? I stood. Hi, Marcus. But Alcott? That's not... He looked at the invitation in his memory. Connolly. Wait, your real name is Connolly? Paige Connolly, Julia's older sister. I go by Alcott professionally, have for years. The air between us changed. I watched Marcus do the math. The last name, the invitation, the sister Julia had mentioned only in passing, always vaguely, always dismissively. She never... He trailed off. She never mentioned she had a sister in tech. She said her sister was... He stopped himself, but not fast enough. Was what? I asked. His eyes dropped. She said you were... estranged. That you had problems. I see. People at nearby tables were turning. A conversation at this volume with the groom at a wedding? It drew eyes the way a raised voice in a library does. My mother appeared in seconds. She moved through the crowd with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime controlling rooms. Marcus, darling, don't bother Paige. Her voice was warm, her eyes were not. She's here to enjoy, not to talk business. Marcus looked at Donna, the way you look at someone who just told you the sky is green. Business? Mrs. Connolly, do you know who this is? He gestured toward me. This is the CEO of Medbridge Solutions. We're about to sign a $2.8 million contract with her company. Donna's face did something I'd never seen before. For 1 second, maybe less, the mask slipped. Her mouth opened. Her eyes went wide. Something behind them recalculated. Then the smile returned, thinner, tighter. Well, isn't that lovely? Across the reception, Julia was watching. She'd been mid-conversation with a bridesmaid, but her body had turned toward us, her glass frozen halfway to her lips. She set it down on the nearest table and started walking over. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my sister's eyes. Not of me, of being found out. Marcus didn't wait for Julia to reach us. He was already moving toward the stage, microphone in hand, running on the adrenaline of a man who'd just stumbled into what he thought was the greatest coincidence of the evening. Everyone, sorry, one more quick announcement. He grinned at the crowd. 200 faces turned. I just found out something incredible. The CEO of Medbridge Solutions, the company that's about to transform our clinic operations, is here tonight, and she happens to be Julia's older sister. The string quartet had stopped. Even the catering staff paused. Paige Alcott, or, as I just found out, Paige Connolly, Julia's older sister. Marcus pointed toward my table. Built her company from the ground up. No family connections, no investors initially. She coded the first prototype herself while working 2 jobs, Forbes 30 Under 30 finalist, and she's been sitting at the back table this whole time. Silence first, then applause, scattered at the start, then louder. Then sustained. People craned their necks. A few stood. I stayed on my feet, nodded once. Thank you, Marcus. This is Julia's day. Let's keep the focus on the bride and groom. But 200 people were already doing what 200 people do. They were recalculating. I could see it on their faces. The whispers started immediately. Wait, that's the sister Donna said was finding herself? That's the one who left? Forbes? At the head table, my mother sat motionless. She was still smiling, but the smile had gone rigid. The kind of expression muscles hold when the brain behind them has stopped sending instructions. Julia stood frozen near the dessert table. Her bouquet dangled from one hand. And Aunt Helen, my mother's most loyal messenger, the woman who'd called me difficult twice in a decade, walked up to me with her face flushed pink. Why didn't you tell us? I did, Aunt Helen. I kept my voice level. 6 years ago, you said I was the difficult one. She had no answer for that. She stood there with her mouth half open, then turned and walked away. The status reveal was just the appetizer. The main course was still coming, and it had nothing to do with me. Julia reached Marcus before I did. I couldn't hear the words from where I stood, but I could read the body language. Julia's hands moved fast, explaining, deflecting, reshaping. Marcus's arms were crossed. His jaw was set. He shook his head once, slowly, the way a man does when he's hearing something that doesn't add up. Donna intercepted me on the way to the bar. You planned this, didn't you? Planned what? Being successful? I looked at her. No, Mom, that was your idea, remember? Be independent. You came here to humiliate your sister. I came because Dad asked me to. Everything else, you built yourself. She stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a hiss. You always had to make everything about you. This is the first time in 9 years I've been in the same room as you. I didn't make a speech. I didn't ask for the microphone. Your son-in-law introduced me. Take it up with him. She turned and walked away. I watched her hands. They were trembling. 5 minutes later, Marcus appeared at my side. His phone was in his hand. His face was different now. The warmth from the announcement gone, replaced by something flat and controlled. Paige, can we talk? Not here. We stepped onto the balcony overlooking the vineyard. The sun was setting. The light was beautiful. It felt obscene given what was coming. My team sent me the due diligence report this morning, he said. I hadn't read it until just now. He held up his phone. Julia's name is on the credential verification list. I know. It says her master's degree from State University doesn't exist. They have no record of her completing any program. She enrolled but didn't finish sophomore year. I know. He stared at me. You knew? And you didn't tell me? The final verification came back yesterday morning. Saturday delivery to my compliance officer's email. She forwarded it to me 3 hours before I got in the car to drive here. I haven't had time to process it through legal yet, Marcus. I didn't even know how to begin that conversation. Hi, your fiancé's credentials don't check out. Also, she's my estranged sister. There's no playbook for this. His phone screen went dark. He stood there, both hands on the railing, staring at the vineyard rows below. 3 minutes of silence. The bass from the reception music thumped faintly through the glass doors. Then he said something I'll never forget. I'm going to ask her once, Marcus said, still gripping the railing. In front of everyone, because if she lies to my face one more time, in front of my family, my partners, then I'll know exactly who I almost married. Marcus, don't. I need to do this. He walked back inside. I followed 3 steps behind. I didn't want to be part of whatever was about to happen, but I couldn't look away either. Julia was standing near the cake table, talking to a bridesmaid with a smile that was working too hard. She saw Marcus coming and her smile brightened. Baby, whatever she told you, did you graduate from State? The bridesmaid took a step back. What? Julia laughed, a short, nervous sound. Of course I don't. Did you? Julia's eyes moved, left, right. She was scanning the room, calculating who could hear. Most of the tables within earshot had gone quiet. Can we talk about this later? You told me you had a master's. Marcus's voice wasn't loud. It was rigid, the kind of quiet that makes people lean in. You told your parents you graduated. You told my clinic you were certified. Donna materialized at Julia's side. Her hand found Julia's arm. Marcus, lower your voice. Did you know? He turned to Donna. Know what? My daughter graduated with honors. She didn't graduate at all, Mrs. Connolly. Marcus's voice cracked on the last word. She dropped out sophomore year. 200 guests. Total silence. Even the string quartet had stopped. The only sound was a wine glass someone set down too hard at table 6. Julia's face crumpled. The performance fell away all at once, like scaffolding collapsing off a building. Tears streaked her makeup. I was going to tell you. When? After the wedding? Marcus's jaw trembled. After I hired you into my company based on a resume you made up? Donna opened her mouth again, and Marcus spun toward her. Stop! Marcus held up one hand. Not loud, not a shout, but the single word landed like a door closing. Julia's mouth froze mid-sentence. The entire reception went still. He turned and looked at me, standing 10 feet away, silent, holding nothing, doing nothing. This person, his voice cracked. He pressed his fist to his mouth for a moment, steadied himself, then dropped his hand. This person is the only honest Connolly in this room. 200 people looked at me. I didn't speak. I didn't nod. I didn't need to. At the edge of the stage, my father stood alone. One hand gripped the back of a chair. He wasn't defending anyone. He wasn't speaking. He was crying. Silently, the way men cry when they've known for years and said nothing. Marcus walked off the patio and didn't look back. Greg followed him. A cluster of groomsmen trailed after, exchanging glances that said what no one would say out loud. This wedding was over. Julia sank to the ground. Her dress pooled around her like a deflated parachute, all that white fabric, all that money, settling on the flagstone. Two bridesmaids crouched beside her. One handed her a napkin. Julia didn't take it. The reception hummed with the low, electric murmur of 200 people processing something they'd never forget. Chairs scraped, phones came out. Someone at a back table was already texting. My mother turned to me. Her composure was gone, not cracked, shattered. Her voice came out raw. Are you happy now? You destroyed your sister's life. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step closer. I spoke clearly enough for the tables nearby to hear. Not because I wanted an audience, but because I was done having conversations in corners. No, Mom. Julia's lies destroyed Julia's life. My company's standard compliance process found the truth. That's not revenge. That's accountability. You could have buried it, her voice shook. You could have said nothing. And committed fraud? Risked my company, my employees, my clients for a lie? I shook my head. No, I won't sacrifice my integrity for this family's image. Not anymore. Something shifted in the crowd. I could feel it, the weight of perception tilting. A few relatives at nearby tables exchanged looks. Aunt Helen pressed her hand to her mouth. An older man I didn't recognize, someone from Marcus's side, nodded at me once. Just once. But it meant everything. Donna looked around. For the first time, the room wasn't with her. She turned and walked toward the parking lot without another word. A hand touched my arm. I turned. Megan, Julia's maid of honor, stood there, eyes red. I should have said something years ago, she said. I knew about the degree. She begged me to keep quiet. I'm sorry. So the lie had roots, deeper and wider than I'd imagined. I picked up my clutch from the table. It was time to go. I was halfway across the gravel parking lot when I heard his footsteps, uneven, hurried, dress shoes on loose stone. Paige, wait. I stopped but didn't turn around. The evening air was warm and still. Crickets had started up in the vineyard rows. I have nothing left to say, Dad. Then let me say something. His voice was winded. For once. I turned. My father stood under a string of lights that ended at the edge of the lot. His tie was loose. His eyes were swollen. He looked 10 years older than the man I'd left in the garage that morning 9 years ago. I knew it was wrong, he said. Every single day, Paige. I knew what your mother was doing was wrong, and I said nothing. Why? He pressed his lips together, looked at the ground, looked back at me. Because I was a coward. Because it was easier to lose you quietly than to fight her loudly. His voice cracked. And that makes me worse than her. Because she at least believed she was right. I knew she was wrong, and I still chose peace. The word hung between us. Peace, the same word he'd been hiding behind my whole life. That wasn't peace, Dad. That was abandonment. I know. Silence. A car started somewhere in the lot. The muffled bass of the reception music still pulsed from inside. Somewhere behind us, Julia was still sitting on the ground in her wedding dress. Somewhere my mother was finding her car keys. And here, under a string of lights on a gravel lot, my father was doing the only honest thing he'd done in a decade. I don't hate you, I said, but I can't forgive you tonight. Maybe not for a long time. That's fair. I need to go. He nodded. Drive safe. 2 words. Simple, small. But they weren't an excuse this time. They weren't a deflection. For the first time in 9 years, my father said something to me that wasn't designed to end a conversation. It was an admission that he had no right to extend one. Lena was waiting by the car. She didn't ask what he said. She just started the engine. I didn't cry until we hit the highway. The fallout came in waves. The first wave was digital. Within 48 hours, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. But for the first time in nearly a decade, The calls weren't accusations. They were apologies. Aunt Helen called on Monday morning. Her voice was different, lower, stripped of the righteous certainty I'd grown up hearing. Paige, I owe you an apology. I believed everything your mother told me. For 9 years. Every word. I was wrong. I thanked her. I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't. My great-aunt Margaret, my grandmother's sister, the oldest living member of the family, sent me an email that night. 3 lines. Your grandmother would have been so proud of you. I'm sorry we weren't there. Please don't give up on all of us. The second wave was professional. Marcus's colleagues at Lakeview began verifying Julia's employment history. What they found matched what I already suspected. Julia had never held the title of healthcare administrator. She was a receptionist. A good one by most accounts. Personable, organized, well-liked. But the title on her LinkedIn, the credentials on her resume, the degree on the wall of her home office, none of it was real. Marcus emailed me Tuesday evening. Professional, controlled. The contract with Medbridge remains on track. Julia's situation is personal, and I won't let it affect our professional relationship. But I need some time before our next meeting. I hope you understand. I understood. The third wave was social media. Donna posted once, a long, tearful paragraph. My family is being torn apart by jealousy and lies. Pray for us. It was the same playbook she'd run for years, but this time the comment section didn't cooperate. What about Paige? What really happened at the wedding? Is it true about Julia's degree? She deleted the post within 4 hours. Then, on Wednesday night, a text from Julia. No preamble, no performance. I'm sorry, for all of it. I don't expect you to believe me. I read it 3 times. I didn't respond, not because I didn't believe her, because I didn't know what to say yet. Some messages need to sit before you know what they deserve. 2 weeks later, the consequences had stopped being whispers and started becoming facts. Julia was terminated from Lakeview Medical Partners. The HR department's review confirmed what Marcus already knew. She'd misrepresented her credentials on her employment application, a fabricated degree, a professional title she never held. Under Connecticut's at-will employment laws, that alone was sufficient cause, but it was worse than a simple firing. Because Julia had listed those fake credentials on paperwork submitted during a federal compliance audit the previous year, the clinic's legal team flagged it as a potential liability. She wasn't criminally charged, there was no patient harm, no billing fraud, but the termination was documented as credential misrepresentation. And in healthcare, that's the kind of note that follows you from one job application to the next. Marcus called off the wedding quietly. No dramatic announcement, no public statement. He simply informed family and friends that the engagement was over. The Rosewood estate refunded what it could. The registry gifts were returned. The honeymoon to Portugal was cancelled. I heard this secondhand through Lena, who heard it from a mutual connection at the hospital. Donna's social circle, the one she'd spent 30 years cultivating, began to contract. Old friends stopped calling. Neighbors who used to drop by with casseroles kept their distance. Great-Aunt Margaret told me that at a family gathering the following month, Donna sat in the corner and spoke to almost no one. She looked like a woman who'd run out of script, Margaret said. The Medbridge contract with Lakeview went through on schedule. $2.8 million. My team handled the implementation over the next 6 months. Marcus and I kept things professional, cordial, efficient, separate from everything personal. He sent me flowers on Medbridge's 5th anniversary. The card read, "From one self-made person to another." Then, on a rainy Thursday, a package arrived at my apartment. Small, no return address, Connecticut postmark. Inside was a piece of paper I hadn't seen in 12 years. My honor roll certificate, the one my mother had pulled off the refrigerator when I was 15, the one that had vanished by morning. It was slightly bent at the corners, yellowed along the edges. A post-it note was stuck to the back in my father's shaky handwriting. It was never cluttered. It was always yours. He'd kept it, 12 years, in a desk drawer, hidden from my mother. The way he'd hidden every honest impulse he'd ever had. It wasn't enough. A piece of paper couldn't undo a decade. But I held it for a long time before I put it down. I didn't call anyone for a week. I needed the silence. Then, on a Sunday morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee and did what I should have done years ago. Not out of anger, not out of victory, but out of clarity. I set the terms. I wrote my mother an email, not a text, not a call, an email, because Donna performed best in real time, and I wasn't giving her a stage. Mom, I don't hate you, but I won't pretend anymore. You chose Julia not because she needed you more, but because she was easier to control. I was inconvenient because I asked questions. I'm not asking anymore. If you want a relationship with me, it starts with honesty, not a performance, not a Facebook post. Honesty. The ball is in your court. I hit send. I didn't reread it. She never replied. I wasn't surprised. Narcissists don't negotiate. They perform or they retreat. Donna retreated. I called my father the following evening. I'm open to staying in touch, I said, but on my terms. No more give it time. No more hiding behind Mom. If you want to be my father out loud. A long pause. I could hear him breathing. I'll try. Don't try. Do. Okay. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It was a crack in a wall. Enough to let light through. Not enough to walk through. Not yet. As for Julia, I didn't reach out. Not because I hated her. Because I wasn't ready. Forgiveness isn't a door you slam shut. It's a door you open when you're strong enough to stand in the frame without flinching. I wasn't there yet. Maybe someday. But not on anyone else's timeline. That Friday night, Lena came over with Thai food and a bottle of wine. We sat on my living room floor, containers spread between us, and she raised her glass. To the family you chose. I smiled. For the first time in this whole story, a real one. To the family I chose. There's a question people ask me, not often. But when they hear pieces of my story, at a conference or over dinner, or in one of those late-night conversations that go deeper than you planned, they ask, do you feel vindicated? I'm sitting in my office right now. It's early, 6:30, before anyone else gets in. The Boston skyline is turning orange through the window. 28 desks out there, 28 people who'll walk in within the hour, each of them building something that matters. This company started as 12 pages in a professor's lab and a girl who couldn't afford her own dorm sheets. And no, I don't feel vindicated. Vindication implies I needed them to be wrong for me to be right. I didn't. I just needed to be free. For years, I measured myself by a scale my mother built, a scale designed so that I would always come up short and Julia would always shine. It took me a long time to realize the scale itself was broken. Not me. I started therapy 3 years ago. Twice a month, Wednesday evenings, with a woman named Dr. Russo, who has a way of asking questions that make you sit in silence for a full minute before you can answer. I used to think therapy was a sign of weakness, something you needed only if you couldn't handle your own problems. Turns out, it's the opposite. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than building MedBridge, harder than sleeping 3 hours a night, harder than walking into that wedding. My mother's voice still plays in my head sometimes. Resilience is a gift, Paige. She said it to justify leaving me with nothing. She meant it as a weapon. But she was right about one thing. Resilience is a gift. She just didn't give it to me. I forged it myself, in late-night kitchens and early-morning classrooms and a dorm room with a broken window, and nobody, not her, not anyone, gets to take credit for that. Here's where everyone is now. My mother still lives in the house on Maple Ridge Lane. She posts on Facebook less frequently, once or twice a month, where it used to be daily. The posts are shorter, no more long paragraphs about sacrifice and motherhood, mostly photos of her garden. Aunt Helen told me Donna joined a book club but quit after 2 meetings because the women asked too many personal questions. She hasn't reached out to me. I don't expect her to. Some people would rather lose a daughter than admit they were wrong. I've made peace with that, not because it doesn't hurt, but because waiting for her to change was hurting more. My father calls me every Sunday, 5:30 in the evening like clockwork. The calls last 5 to 10 minutes. He tells me about the weather, about the neighbor's dog, about a documentary he watched. He never mentions my mother. I never ask. It's not enough, but it's something. And after 9 years of nothing, something feels like a lot. He's trying. I see that. I'm not sure trying is enough, but he's doing it out loud, and that's the part that matters. Julia enrolled at a community college in New Haven, a real program this time, with real transcripts and real coursework. She and Marcus are no longer together. She sent me a handwritten letter, 4 pages front and back, about 3 months after the wedding. I read it at my kitchen table. It was honest in a way Julia had never been honest with me before. She didn't blame my mother. She didn't blame me. She wrote, "I spent so long being who they wanted me to be that I forgot to become anyone real." I haven't written back yet. Some letters need time to sit before you know what to say in return. But I haven't thrown it away either. It's in my desk drawer, right next to the honor roll certificate. Marcus and I closed the Lakeview contract successfully. We keep things professional, clean, respectful, boundaried. He's a good man who got caught in someone else's wreckage. I respect how he handled it. And me, MedBridge is growing. We're hiring. The platform is live in over 30 clinics across New England, Lakeview, plus a dozen other partners. But that's not the update that matters. The update that matters is this: I sleep through the night now. I don't flinch when a Connecticut area code lights up my phone. I have people around me who chose me, not because we share blood, but because we share respect. That's enough. That's more than enough. If you're watching this and you recognize your family and mine, I see you. I was you. You don't have to blow up a wedding to find your freedom. Sometimes it's quieter than that. Sometimes it's blocking a number at 2 in the morning. Sometimes it's walking into a therapist's office for the first time and saying the sentence you've been holding for years. Sometimes it's just the word no. Said once, said clearly, and not taken back. My parents taught me one thing, even though they didn't mean to. They taught me I could survive without them. And once you know that, really know it, in your bones, in your worst moments, in the silence of an empty dorm room at 18, nobody has power over you anymore. I don't tell this story for pity. I have a company, a best friend who held my hand under a tablecloth at the worst dinner party in Connecticut history, and a life I built with my own 2 burned, cracked, dishwater-wrinkled hands. I don't need pity. I tell this story because for 9 years, my mother controlled the narrative. Paige left because she was difficult. Paige refused our help. Paige is the problem. 200 people believed her. My aunt believed her. My cousins believed her. And there were nights, long, cold, 3 a.m. nights, when I almost believed her too. Today, I'm taking my story back. If you're the scapegoat in your family, Kai, the one who's too much or not enough, if you're the name that gets whispered at Thanksgiving, the child whose certificate got pulled off the refrigerator, hear me when I say this. Their rejection is not your reflection. I'm Paige Connolly. I'm 27. I run a company I built from nothing. I have a family that chose me, and I sleep well at night. That's enough. If Paige's story reminded you of your own, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Were you the golden child, or the one who got left behind? And if this resonated with someone you know, share it with them. Sometimes the story you needed to hear is the one someone else needed to send you. Check the description for more stories like this one. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself. She'll never afford a house. She can barely afford lunch, my father announced to 40 guests at my own birthday party, and the table laughed. He was standing at the head of the table, wineglass raised, grinning like he'd just told the world's best joke. And maybe, to him, it was. My boyfriend Nathan squeezed my hand under the table. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just looked my father in the eye and smiled. What he didn't know was that I'd spent the last 8 years preparing for exactly this moment. Not for revenge, for the truth. And the truth was sitting in my coat pocket, a set of keys to a house he drives past every single day. But the keys were only part of it. What came after? What my aunt pulled from her purse? What my mother had written years before she died? That's the part that made his face go white. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I always love reading those. I'm Myra. I just turned 30. Now let me take you back to where this really started. 8 years ago, the week my mother was buried. The house smelled like casseroles and lilies. That's what I remember most about the week we buried my mother. How everyone kept bringing food nobody ate and flowers that made me sneeze. I was 22. Helen Lawson, my mom, had fought ovarian cancer for 14 months, and she lost on a Tuesday in March. The funeral was packed. My father, Gerald, sat in the front pew shaking hands like a mayor at a ribbon cutting. He cried exactly twice, both times when someone was watching. Brenda, my older sister, stayed pressed against his side. He held her, stroked her hair, told her everything would be okay. I washed dishes in the kitchen, not because anyone asked, because no one thought to tell me to stop. That Friday, Dad called a family meeting. Just the three of us, at the dining table where Mom used to set 4 plates. "Your mother handled the soft stuff," he said. "I handle the money. From now on, things are going to be more structured." Structured meant this. Brenda would keep receiving her monthly allowance, her car insurance payment, her tuition reimbursement. Brenda had a plan. Brenda was in grad school. Me? I'd just finished a 2-year associate's degree and was working the front desk at an insurance office for $31,000 a year. "You need to figure yourself out first," Dad said. Not cruel, not loud, just final. I nodded. What else could I do? That night I went down to the basement to grab a box of Mom's old sweaters, and behind the water heater, tucked against the wall, I found a small cardboard box labeled Helen, Personal, in my mother's handwriting. Dad told us he'd thrown everything out. I took the box. I didn't open it. I just held it in the car and drove home. The next 2 years moved like a time lapse of someone else's life getting better while mine stood still. Brenda turned 26 and Dad bought her a silver Audi, a graduation gift for finishing her MBA. She posted the photo. 93 likes. Dad commented a heart emoji. Brenda turned 27 and Dad covered the down payment on a townhouse 15 minutes from his place. "Every girl deserves a safe place to land," he told the family at Easter. I was working 2 jobs by then. Front desk at the insurance office until 5. Bartending at a place called Rosie's until midnight. I lived in a shared apartment with 2 strangers who left hair in the drain and played music until 2 a.m. My half of the rent was $480. At every family gathering, Thanksgiving, Christmas, somebody's birthday, Dad would find a way to mention me. "Myra's still figuring things out. Not everyone blooms at the same speed, right?" He'd say it with a sad little smile, like he was being generous, like he was rooting for me. And every aunt, every uncle, every cousin would nod with that look. The tilted head, the soft eyes. Poor Myra. Then the whispers started. I'd hear them secondhand. "Is she okay? Gerald says things are tough." And my father would lean in, voice low, noble. "I've been helping, quietly." He wasn't. I found out the truth by accident. A thank you card from my Aunt Donna arrived at Dad's house, forwarded to me by mistake. "So glad the money I sent Gerald is helping you with rent, sweetheart. Hang in there." I had never received a cent from Donna. Not one. I read the card 3 times. Then I put it in the same drawer as my mother's box. I didn't start building because of my father. I started because I was tired of standing still. At 23, I enrolled in an online bookkeeping certificate, $40 a month, self-paced. I studied on my phone between insurance calls. I practiced on spreadsheets during slow nights at Rosie's when the bar was dead. Turns out I'm good with numbers, not genius level, just steady, careful. The kind of person who checks a column 3 times before moving on. I picked up freelance bookkeeping clients, a nail salon, a landscaping company, a guy who sold vintage guitars on the internet, $20 an hour, then 30. By 24, my freelance income passed my insurance salary. I quit the bar. Nobody in my family noticed. Dad still told people I was bartending. "At her age," he'd say, shaking his head. I let him. Then I started researching real estate. Not because I had some master plan, because a podcast I listened to on the bus mentioned house hacking, and I thought, I'm already living with strangers. At least I could own the place. I spent 6 months going to open houses on Saturdays, learning neighborhoods, reading inspection reports for fun. At 25, I bought my first property, a duplex on Greenfield Avenue, 20 minutes outside the city. $87,000, FHA loan, 3.5% down. The kitchen had water damage and the carpet smelled like a wet dog. I painted every room myself. I watched YouTube tutorials and fixed the leaking sink. I rented the other half to a nurse named Claudia, who paid on time every single month. The rental income covered my mortgage. All of it. I didn't tell Brenda. I didn't tell Dad. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't hide my life to plan some grand reveal. I hid it because every time I shared something good, he found a way to make it small. I was 27 when my father tried to blow up my career. I'd just been promoted to senior administrative coordinator at the insurance company. New title, small raise, my own desk near the window. It was the first time in 5 years I'd felt like I was building something that couldn't be taken away. Then my boss, Linda, called me into her office on a Wednesday afternoon. She closed the door. That's how I knew. "Your father called," she said. "He expressed concern about your mental state. He asked us to keep an eye on you." I sat there very still while the walls got closer. "He said you've been struggling since your mother passed. He said you put on a brave face, but—" She trailed off. "I'm required to flag it." It took me 3 weeks to clear it. 3 meetings with HR. A wellness evaluation I didn't need. A form I signed promising I had no current mental health crisis. All because my father picked up a phone and performed concern to a stranger. I almost lost the promotion. They almost put me on a monitoring plan. That night I sat in my car in the parking lot for 45 minutes. My hands shook on the steering wheel, not from sadness, from something hotter. He knew I was doing better, and he couldn't stand it. I drove home and opened the closet where I kept my mother's box. I'd been carrying it for 5 years and hadn't once looked inside. That night, I sat on the bed and pulled the tape off the lid. Inside, her gold-plated earrings, a faded photo from her college graduation, a recipe card for banana bread, and at the bottom, a sealed envelope with my name on it, in her handwriting. I picked it up, ran my thumb across the ink. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Thanksgiving that year, I walked into Dad's house owning 2 properties. Nobody at the table had a clue. I'd bought the second one 3 months earlier, a small ranch house in the same neighborhood as the duplex. Foreclosure, paid cash from the equity I'd built, and 2 years of freelance savings. I was 28, and my net worth had quietly crossed 6 figures. At the dinner table, I sat in my usual spot, the middle between cousins, away from the head where Dad carved the turkey like a king granting portions. Aunt Patricia leaned over. "Honey, are you eating enough? Your dad says things have been tough." I blinked. "Things are fine, Aunt Pat." She patted my hand. That look again, the tilted head. From the head of the table, Dad raised his glass. "I just want all my girls to be okay. That's all a father can ask." Brenda nodded beside him. The room murmured agreement. No one turned to me and asked, "What do you say?" I realized something that night, sitting in that dining room surrounded by people who loved me secondhand, through the filter of whatever Gerald told them. He'd built a complete story. In his version, I was the struggling daughter and he was the sacrificing father, and the story was so consistent, so well rehearsed, that challenging it would only make me look ungrateful. That's the thing about a lie told by someone everyone trusts. It doesn't need proof, it just needs repetition. After dinner, I stepped onto the back porch for air. My cousin Derek followed me out. "Hey," he said, leaning on the railing. "My mom's been asking questions about the money she sent your dad. For you. She says something doesn't add up." I looked at him for a long moment. "Tell her to keep asking," I said. I met Nathan at a real estate tax workshop in a hotel conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and industrial carpet. He was an accountant, quiet, the kind of guy who takes notes in full sentences. Halfway through the session, I asked a question about depreciation schedules for multi-unit rentals, and I caught him looking at me like I didn't match whatever picture he'd drawn in his head. After the workshop, he stopped me in the parking lot. "That question you asked, you weren't hypothetical, were you?" "No." "How many units?" 3 doors, 2 properties. He nodded slowly, like he was adjusting a spreadsheet in his mind. "Can I buy you a coffee?" We dated quietly. I told Nathan everything, the duplex, the ranch house, the freelance clients, the 60% savings rate. He didn't flinch. He didn't try to fix me or warn me or slow me down. One night in his apartment, staring at takeout containers, he said, "You don't owe him a performance of poverty." That sentence lived in my chest for weeks. I introduced Nathan to my family at a Sunday dinner. Dad shook his hand, then spent the entire meal interrogating him. Salary, savings, home ownership, 5-year plan. Not a single question about who Nathan was, only what Nathan could provide. After dinner, Dad pulled me aside in the hallway. "He seems nice," Dad said, "but nice doesn't pay bills." He straightened a framed photo of Brenda on the wall. "You've always needed someone stronger than you, sweetheart." Later in the car, Nathan was quiet. Then he said, "He didn't ask me one question about you. Not one." I stared out the window. "That's because to him," I said, "there's nothing about me worth asking." The lies got more specific that winter. Cousin Derek texted me a screenshot from a family group chat I wasn't in. Dad had written, "Appreciate everyone's patience. Myra's credit card situation is under control. I've been paying it down monthly. She doesn't like to talk about it." $20,000. That was the number he'd invented. I pulled up my credit report on my phone. Score, 782. 0 balances, 0 missed payments. The cleanest financial record of anyone in my family, probably including Gerald. But I couldn't walk into a room of 40 relatives with a printout of my credit score. That's not how families work. The story was already gospel. Dad had told it so many times, with such practiced sorrow, that correcting it would sound like denial. And that's when I understood the endgame. He wasn't just tearing me down, he was building a safety net for himself. If I ever succeeded, he'd take the credit. I paid off her debt. I gave her a second chance. The narrative was already written. He just needed time to let it harden. If I stayed quiet forever, he'd rewrite my entire life. The house on Maple Ridge came up in March. A 1940s craftsman cottage, 3 bedrooms, original hardwood, renovated kitchen. The owner was relocating to Arizona and priced it to sell fast. I knew the street. I knew it well. My father lived at 4708 Maple Ridge Drive. This house was 4712. I made a cash offer from the equity of my first 2 properties plus my savings. The seller accepted in 48 hours. I signed the papers on a Tuesday morning. Nathan sat beside me, holding my hand the way he does, steady, without commentary. My father's house was 47 steps to the left. I didn't buy that house to prove a point. I bought it because it was a good deal, but I'd be lying if I said the address didn't cross my mind. Dad called on a Sunday morning in April, 3 weeks before my 30th birthday. His voice had that warm, generous tone, the one he uses when he wants something to look like a gift. "30 is a big deal, sweetheart. Let me throw you a party. At my place. I'll handle everything." My first instinct was to say no. My second instinct was to remember what Nathan told me once. "If you say no, he'll tell everyone you're ungrateful." So I said yes. Dad went to work immediately. He ordered catering. He rented folding chairs. He sent out invitations, not to my friends but to his people. His golf buddies, his former coworkers, the neighbors who'd watched me grow up, aunts, uncles, cousins from both sides, 40 guests on the list. It was the kind of production that looked like love if you didn't know better. Brenda called me midweek, breathless. "Dad's going all out. He even ordered a cake with your photo on it. Isn't that sweet?" I let that sit for a moment. "Who's on the guest list?" "Oh, everyone. Family, neighbors, some of his work friends." She paused. "I think even your old boss Linda. Isn't that nice?" Linda, the woman Gerald had called to sabotage me, the woman who'd nearly put me on a monitoring plan. That wasn't a coincidence. Gerald didn't do coincidences. He did chess moves. Nathan found me that night sitting on the kitchen floor, staring at the invitation Dad had mailed, to my own birthday party, with his return address on the envelope. "He's not throwing you a party," Nathan said, sitting down beside me. "He's building an audience." I turned the envelope over in my hands. In my coat closet, hanging on a hook, was a jacket with a set of keys in the pocket. "Then I guess I'd better bring a show," I said. The day of the party, I stood outside Dad's house for a full minute before going in. The lawn was mowed in diagonal lines. A balloon arch framed the front door, silver and white. Through the window I could see the banner, "Happy 30th Myra," in curly letters. It looked like love. It looked like effort. And maybe, Somewhere underneath the performance, a tiny piece of it was real. That was the part that always got me. Nathan and I walked in together. The house was already crowded, people clustered around the buffet table, paper plates in hand, laughing, catching up. Dad was in the center of the living room, shaking hands, hugging women on the cheek, topping off wine glasses. But the thing I noticed first was the wall. The living room wall, the one visible from every angle of the open floor plan, was covered in framed photos. Brenda graduating college, Brenda's engagement party, Brenda's first house, Brenda and Dad at a restaurant, matching smiles. My photo was there too. One, from when I was 10, missing my 2 front teeth, holding a participation ribbon from a science fair. I looked at it for 3 seconds, then I looked away. Dad spotted me and opened his arms. There she is. The birthday girl. He hugged me. Then he stepped back, looked me up and down. My gray knit sweater, my dark jeans, my flat boots. Couldn't find something nicer? He said it lightly. It's your birthday. Before I could answer, he turned to Brenda, who stood behind him in a fitted emerald dress. Doesn't Brenda look beautiful? I got her that dress last week. I breathed. Nathan's hand found the small of my back. Across the room, Aunt Donna caught my eye. She held her purse close to her side, patted it once, and gave me the smallest nod. The party filled in like a theater before the curtain. People took seats at the long dining table, Dad's pride, a 12-seater he'd bought after Mom died, because bigger tables mean more audience. Dad worked the room. He clinked glasses. He told stories. He played the host the way he always does, loud enough to be heard, warm enough to be believed. When everyone was seated, he raised his glass. To Myra, he said, my little girl who always marches to her own drum. A few people clapped. I smiled. Standard birthday toast. I could survive this. Then he leaned toward his golf buddy Jim, seated to his right. He lowered his voice, but not enough. The acoustics of a quiet dining room don't forgive whispers. Between us, I still help her out every month. That's what dads do, right? Jim nodded solemnly. Aunt Patricia, 3 chairs away, looked at me with that tilted head pity I'd been seeing for 8 years. Jim's wife turned to me brightly. So, what do you do, sweetheart? I opened my mouth. She's in admin, Dad answered. Good solid work. Not everyone's meant for the fast lane. He winked at me, like it was a compliment. Under the table, Nathan's hand tightened around mine. I could feel his pulse, faster than usual. He was angry. I wasn't. Not yet. I was watching. I looked around the room, 40 faces, and every single one of them believed a version of me that my father wrote. The struggling daughter, the grateful recipient, the slow bloomer who needed Daddy's help. Dad stood up again, tapped his glass with a fork. The room hushed. I want to say a few more words about my Myra. His eyes glinted, and I thought, here it comes. He took his time. He always does. Gerald Lawson doesn't rush a performance. He lets the silence gather first, lets the room lean in, lets every eye find him. You know, he started, swirling his wine, when Brenda turned 30, she'd just closed on her first house. He paused for the approving murmurs. Got them. Myra? Another pause. Let's just say she's on a different timeline. Polite laughter. A few people looked down. Dad rode the momentum. His voice got bigger. She'll never afford a house. She can barely afford lunch. The laughter was louder this time. Jim slapped the table. A cousin I barely knew snorted into her napkin. Patricia pressed her lips together but said nothing. Dad spread his arms wide, grinning. But that's why she has me, right, sweetheart? He looked at me and winked. The room waited for me to laugh along, to play the part, to roll my eyes and say, "Oh, Dad, stop." I felt the blood in my face, the heat behind my eyes. Nathan squeezed my hand so tight I could feel each knuckle. 3 seconds of silence. I looked at my father, really looked. At the man who washed dishes in his own mother's kitchen growing up, who clawed his way to middle management, who built his entire identity around the idea that without him, none of us could stand. And I realized he wasn't joking. He needed this to be true. I smiled. Not the polite smile I'd been wearing all night. A different one. The kind Nathan recognized. The one that means a decision has been made. Actually, Dad, I said. My voice was steady, quiet. The kind of quiet that makes a full room go still. About that. I didn't rush either. Since we're all here, I said, and since you brought up houses, I rested my hand on the pocket of my coat, which was draped over the back of my chair. I didn't pull anything out. Not yet. Dad laughed. The reflexive kind. The kind that fills space when something feels off. What, you got a lottery ticket in there? A few people chuckled. Not exactly. I reached into the pocket, slowly. The room tracked my hand the way people follow a match being struck. I pulled out a set of keys, 2 brass keys on a simple ring with a leather tag clipped to it. I set them on the table in front of me, gently. No toss, no drama, just metal on wood. I closed on a house 6 weeks ago, I said. The laughter died. Dad's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Brenda tilted her head, not the pity tilt I was used to from everyone else. A genuinely confused one. Wait, what do you mean? I mean, I bought a house. I looked around the table. Paid in full, no mortgage. The silence had texture now. I could hear the ice settling in someone's water glass. Dad set his wine down, carefully. The way you put something down when your hands might shake if you don't focus. Paid in full, he repeated. With what money? It was the first honest question he'd asked me in 8 years. I didn't answer it. Not yet. I just let the keys sit there, brass catching the overhead light, the little leather tag facing up, the address printed on one side in small, clean letters that nobody could read from across the table. Nobody except the man sitting 47 steps away from that address every single day. Dad recovered fast. I'll give him that. He leaned back in his chair and chuckled. A performance chuckle, the kind meant to signal that nothing has changed. Everything's under control. She's kidding. He scanned the table, searching for allies. Myra, you're kidding, right? Do I look like I'm kidding? Nathan, beside me, spoke for the first time all evening. His voice was level. She's not kidding. Dad's jaw shifted. He looked at Nathan the way you look at a locked door you expected to be open. The whispers started. Patricia turned to the woman next to her. Jim rubbed the back of his neck. Derek, halfway down the table, leaned forward on his elbows. Dad dropped his voice, trying to shrink the conversation back to size. Okay, so, where? Before I could answer, a voice came from the far end of the table. Calm, clear, unhurried. Gerald. Aunt Donna. She sat with her hands folded on the table, her purse open beside her plate. While we're clearing things up tonight, she said, I have a few questions too. Dad turned to face his sister, and I watched something cross his face that I'd never seen before. Not anger, not defiance. Fear. It was there and gone in half a second, but I caught it. Nathan caught it. Donna definitely caught it. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. Not thick, but full enough. She set it on the table beside her plate and rested her hand on top of it. But Myra first, she said, and nodded at me. Go ahead, honey. Tell them the address. I picked up the keys, turned the leather tag so the printed side faced out, and in the same quiet voice I'd been using all night, I read it out loud. 4712 Maple Ridge Drive. I said it once. I didn't need to say it again. The silence that followed had a shape to it, like a held breath across 40 people at once. Dad lives at 4708 Maple Ridge Drive. Everyone at that table had been to his house. Everyone knew the street, and everyone was now doing the math. Patricia was the first to speak. That's right next to you, Gerald. Dad didn't move. His hand was still resting on the base of his wine glass, but his fingers had gone white. I continued, same tone, same pace, like reading the weather. 3 bedrooms, renovated kitchen, original hardwood floors, paid in full, no mortgage. The whispers weren't whispers anymore. Jim pulled his chair back from the table an inch, as if distance could help him process. His wife stared at me with her mouth open. Brenda shook her head slightly. You? Since when do you? This is my 3rd property, actually. I didn't say it to land a blow. I said it because the full truth was owed to a room that had been fed half-truths for 8 years. Third? Patricia repeated. My first was a duplex. I was 25. The second was a ranch house 2 years later. I looked around the table, at the faces that had pitied me, prayed for me, given money to my father to pass along. I've never carried a balance on a credit card. My credit score is 782, and I haven't asked Dad for $1 since Mom died. The room shifted, not toward me, away from Gerald. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't performing. I was just standing in the truth for the first time in front of people who'd only ever been given the lie. I'm not telling you this to embarrass anyone. I'm telling you because someone at this table spent 8 years making sure none of you believed I could. My father found his voice the way a drowning man finds the surface. Gasping, reaching, not graceful. 3 properties. He forced a laugh. It came out wrong. Too high, too tight. Come on, who helped you? Nathan? Was this your money? Nathan didn't flinch. No, sir. This was all Myra. Dad shifted tactics. He straightened in his chair, squaring his shoulders, trying to reassemble the patriarch posture the room had always given him permission to wear. Okay, so you bought some fixer-upper somewhere. Congratulations. He waved his hand like he was brushing crumbs off the table. But you didn't have to turn my party into your party? The words left my mouth before I planned them, and the room went quiet again. You told me this was my birthday party, Dad. He opened his mouth, closed it. The slip was out, and it couldn't go back. He'd said the quiet part loud. This was his event, his stage, his audience, and every person at the table heard it. Brenda looked at Dad, then at me, then back at Dad. I watched something flicker behind her eyes. Not anger, not loyalty, something new. Doubt. From 3 seats away, Jim leaned toward his wife. He thought he was whispering, but the room was so quiet now that a whisper carried like a shout. Did you know about this? He told me she was broke. His wife shook her head slowly. I didn't react. I didn't need to. The truth was doing its own work now, filling corners, turning over rocks, exposing things that had lived comfortably in the dark. I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip. This is my birthday, I said evenly, and I get to decide what I share at my own birthday. I've watched my father change masks my entire life, the provider, the joker, the concerned parent, but the one he reached for now, the one he always saves for emergencies, is the victim. His shoulders dropped, his voice softened, his eyes went red at the rims, a trick I'd seen at Mom's funeral, at Brenda's graduation, at every moment when sympathy was more useful than authority. So this is what I get? He pressed his hand to his chest. I raised you. I kept this family together after your mother died. And this is how you repay me? His voice cracked. Perfectly timed. Humiliating me at my own table? He turned to face the room, slowly, deliberately, making eye contact with each person the way a preacher works a congregation. You all see this, right? I gave everything for these girls. A few heads nodded, reflexively. The old programming was strong. Aunt Patricia reached for her napkin. Jim studied his plate. And for one terrible second I felt the pull, the gravity of 30 years of conditioning telling me to apologize, to smooth it over, to let him rewrite this too. But I didn't. I looked at Donna. She met my eyes across the table, her hand still resting on that manila folder. You gave everything? I said. Not loud, not cruel, just clear. Dad, let me ask you something. The room held its breath. How much did Aunt Donna send you for my rent over the last 5 years? The color left his face the way light leaves a room when someone flips a switch. Donna stood up, slowly. She picked up the manila folder and opened it. I have the receipts, she said. Literally. Donna didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She laid it out the way a bookkeeper reads a ledger. Clean, factual, devastating. Over the last 5 years, I sent Gerald $14,200 in personal checks. Every single one was earmarked for Myra's rent and living expenses. She pulled photocopies from the folder and spread them across the table. Gerald told me she was struggling, that she couldn't make ends meet, that he was supplementing what I sent with his own money. She turned to me. Myra, did you receive any of this? No, Aunt Donna, not a cent. The photocopies sat on the table like evidence at a trial nobody had called. Each check was a snapshot, a date, an amount, a memo line. For Myra, rent help. For Myra, winter utilities. For Myra, car insurance. Patricia leaned forward, adjusting her reading glasses, scanning the copies. Her face changed with each one. Dad gripped the edge of the table. That was for household expenses. I used it for general. For what, Gerald? Donna's voice was still calm, still measured. She didn't live with you. He had no answer. The sentence just hung there, unfinished, swinging. Derek stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight, staring at his uncle. Then Patricia spoke, and her voice was the quietest it had been all night. Gerald, she removed her glasses. I sent you $600 last Christmas for Myra's car repair. You told me her engine was failing. Dad closed his eyes. My engine was fine, I said. It's always been fine. The room didn't explode. It deflated. 40 people sitting with the slow, heavy realization that the man they'd trusted, the patriarch, the provider, the voice of the family, had been pocketing their generosity and selling a daughter's dignity to fund the story. Donna closed the folder. I'm not here to fight, Gerald. I'm here because I wrote checks to help your daughter, and she never saw a dime. I stood up, not fast, not angry, the way you stand when you've been sitting with something for 8 years, and it's finally light enough to carry upright. Since we're being honest tonight, let me be completely honest. I looked around the room, at the faces I'd grown up with, the aunts who baked me cookies, the uncles who ruffled my hair, the cousins who played tag with me in this very backyard. Every one of them had been told a story about me, and every one of them had believed it. I bought my first property at 25, I said. A duplex on Greenfield Avenue. I was working 2 jobs and saving 60% of my income. I kept my voice even. Factual. I bought the second property at 27. A small ranch house. Paid cash from the equity I'd built. The house next door, Dad's Street, is my third. I paused. I have never had credit card debt. My credit score is 782. I haven't asked Dad for a single dollar since Mom's funeral. I looked at the faces around the table. Some were staring at me, some were staring at Gerald. A few were staring at the floor. Every person in this room was told a different version of my life. I know, because I've heard pieces of it from almost all of you. The struggling daughter, the secret debt, the father paying it off. None of it was true. Linda, my former boss, spoke from the far end of the table. Her voice was tight. I owe you an apology, Myra. Your father called my office. About you. I should have talked to you first. I nodded. Thank you, Linda. Then I looked at the room one more time. I'm not angry at any of you for believing him. He's my father. Of course you believed him. I let that land. But now you know. My father sat down like a man who'd forgotten how chairs work. Heavy, graceless, all at once. The glass of wine he'd been holding all evening sat untouched on the table. The banner behind him still read, Happy 30th Myra, in silver cursive, and the irony was so thick it could have been a 5th guest at his end of the table. He looked at Brenda, his golden child, his mirror, the one who always sat beside him, who always nodded, who always agreed. Brenda was staring at her napkin. Her fingers were twisting the cloth into a tight spiral. You don't understand, Dad said. His voice was stripped down now. No performance, no projection, just a man talking to a room that had stopped listening. Everything I did because I love this family. I let the words exist for a moment, then I answered. No, Dad. You did it because you needed us to need you. I didn't raise my voice. There's a difference. He looked away. Out the window, toward the street, toward the house at 4712, which I now owned, which was dark and empty and 47 steps from his front door. He had nothing, no comeback, no redirect, no mask to reach for. Nathan placed his hand on my shoulder. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Patricia got up from her chair, walked around the long table, and wrapped her arms around me. She smelled like lavender and old guilt. I'm sorry, honey, she said against my hair. I should have asked you. Then Brenda spoke. Her voice was small, shaking, the voice of someone pulling a thread they know will unravel everything. "Dad," she looked up. "Did you also tell them I got my house because of your money?" A beat. "Because I paid you back. 3 years ago. You told me not to tell anyone." The room took another breath, and Gerald Lawson shrank a little more. The dining room had the strange hush of a place where too many truths had been spoken in too short a time. People were processing. Some stared at the table, some stared at Gerald, some stared at nothing. I sat back down. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I reached into my coat, the same pocket that had held the keys, and pulled out a sealed envelope. Cream-colored, slightly yellowed at the edges. My name, in my mother's handwriting, across the front. "Mom left me a letter," I said. "Dad hid the box it was in. Told us he'd thrown all her personal things away. I found it anyway." Gerald's eyes locked on the envelope. I watched recognition hit him. Not of the letter itself, but of what it meant. Helen knew. His wife, who died 8 years ago, had seen him clearly. "I opened it 2 weeks ago," I said. "I won't read all of it, but there's one part I think this room should hear." I unfolded the single page. Mom's handwriting was careful, even near the end, when her hands had been so thin the rings slid off. I read one line. "Myra, your father loves in the only way he knows, by holding on. Don't let him hold so tight that you forget how to stand. I couldn't teach him to let go, but I can tell you, you were always strong enough." Donna pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. Patricia's eyes were wet. Derek looked away. Dad stared at the letter like it was a ghost. "She wrote that?" His voice was barely there. "She knew, Dad." I folded the page and put it back in the envelope. She always knew. He didn't argue, didn't spin, didn't reach for a mask. For the first time in my memory, Gerald Lawson sat in a room full of people with absolutely nothing to say, not because he'd been caught, but because the one person who understood him best had written him down, gently and precisely, before she died. I stood one last time. Not to make a speech, not to deliver a verdict, just to finish what I started. "I'm not here to destroy anyone," I said. "I'm here because tonight was supposed to be about me, and it almost became another performance." I looked at the wall of photos. Brenda's graduation, Brenda's house, Brenda's engagement. My one photo, gap-toothed and 10 years old, holding a participation ribbon. "I own 3 properties. I have no debt. I built this with 2 jobs, 7 years of 60% savings, and a lot of weekends spent learning how to patch drywall." A few people almost smiled. "I'm telling you this not to brag, but because for 8 years, the story told about me in this room was a lie, and lies don't get to be comfortable anymore." I turned to Dad. "I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking for the truth to exist in this room, even if it's uncomfortable." He didn't respond. His eyes were on the table. I picked up the keys from where they'd been sitting, still catching the light, still carrying an address that would shadow him every time he looked out his kitchen window. "The house next door? I'm keeping it. I'll rent it out. And yes, Dad, I'll choose the tenants." I let a small, quiet beat pass. Not a smirk, just the faintest shift at the corner of my mouth. Enough. The room understood. Nathan stood beside me. We didn't leave. We didn't storm out. I pulled my chair back to the table and sat down, because this was still my birthday, and I was done letting anyone else run it. "Now," I said, glancing at the untouched cake in the center of the table, "is someone going to cut that, or do I have to do everything myself?" Derek laughed first, then Patricia. Then the whole table, slowly, like an engine catching. For the first time all night, the laughter wasn't at me. The party didn't end. It changed shape. The table broke into clusters. Small groups talking low, leaning close, recalibrating. Some people came to me. Patricia squeezed my arm. Derek brought me a slice of cake and said, "Happy birthday, cuz. For real this time." A second cousin I hadn't spoken to in years hugged me without a word. Others kept their distance. Not hostile, just recalculating. Gerald had been the axis of this family for so long that losing him as a reference point left people off balance. A few drifted to the kitchen, refilling drinks, avoiding eye contact. That was fine. I didn't need unanimous approval. I just needed the truth in the room. Jim, Dad's golf buddy, walked over to Nathan. He shook his hand firmly. "She's something, isn't she?" Jim said. Nathan's answer was simple. "She always has been." Linda pulled me aside near the hallway. "Myra, if you ever want to come back, there's always a place for you at the office." "I appreciate that, Linda. I really do, but I'm good where I am." She nodded. I could tell she wanted to say more, about the phone call, about what she should have done differently. But some apologies are better left short. Dad sat at the head of the table, alone. His wineglass was finally empty, and no one was refilling it. Brenda sat 2 chairs away, close enough to be present, far enough to be separate. She was staring at her phone, typing nothing. From across the room, I heard a neighbor, Mrs. Garland, who'd lived on Maple Ridge for 30 years, lean in to Patricia. "He told me that girl was on welfare," she whispered. "I almost called social services on her once." Patricia closed her eyes. "Oh my God." I didn't hear it as gossip. I heard it as the sound of a story being rewritten in real time. The party thinned. Coats came off hooks. Cars started in the driveway. But some people stayed. The ones who needed things settled, not just surfaced. Donna sat down across from Dad. The manila folder was closed but still on the table between them like a line drawn in ink. "Gerald." Her voice was even. No venom, no theatrics, just the voice of a woman who'd been writing checks to a ghost. "I'm not going to make a scene. Most of these folks are heading home anyway. But I need you to understand something." Dad looked up. He seemed 10 years older than he had 2 hours ago. $14,200 was sent for Myra. It didn't reach Myra. She folded her hands. "I expect it returned. I don't need it tomorrow, but I need you to acknowledge it." "It was a misunderstanding," Dad said, quietly, automatically. $14,000 is not a misunderstanding, Gerald. Patricia, who had been standing near the kitchen doorway, walked over. "I want my 600 back too." Dad closed his eyes. I watched him do the math. Not just the money, the full inventory, every lie tallied, every check cashed, every dinner where he performed sacrifice while spending someone else's love. "I'll figure it out," he said, almost a whisper. Donna leaned forward. "You have 60 days. After that, I'm talking to a lawyer. Not because I want to, because I need a record." Dad flinched at the word lawyer. Not because he feared a courtroom, because the word made it real. Official. Outside the family grammar he'd always controlled. He pushed back from the table and stood. Slowly. He didn't look at me or Brenda or anyone. He walked into the kitchen where I once washed dishes alone after my mother's funeral, and closed the door behind him. It was the first time in my life I'd seen Gerald Lawson leave the head of the table. "I still love you, Gerald," Donna said to the closed door. "But love doesn't mean I let you keep my money." The back porch was cold. April in the Midwest doesn't care about your revelations. It'll chill you anyway. I stepped outside for air. The porch light was off. I could hear the neighbor's sprinkler ticking in the dark. Brenda came out behind me. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood beside me, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the yard where we used to catch fireflies when Mom was alive, and the world was smaller and simpler. "I paid him back," she said finally. "The down payment. All of it. He told me to keep it quiet, said it was between us." "He told everyone he still supports you," I said. "I know." She pulled her cardigan tighter. "I let him, because it was easier than fighting." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, Myra. You didn't do this to me." "No, but I didn't stop it either." I let that sit. Because she was right. And because the truth doesn't always need softening. We stood shoulder to shoulder. No hug, no tears, but something else. A doorway that had been sealed shut for years cracking open, just enough to let light through. "3 properties?" she said. I almost laughed. "Took me 8 years." "That's..." She shook her head. "Honestly, that's incredible." I had good motivation. She turned to me. I could see her processing. The years of being the favorite, the years of accepting advantages she never questioned, the slow understanding that being chosen wasn't the same as being loved. "Can I see it?" she asked. "The house, the one next door." "Anytime," she nodded. We looked out at the dark yard together. I was the favorite, she said quietly. I know that. And I'm starting to realize that wasn't a gift either. It was the most honest thing my sister had ever said to me. The first week after the party was strange. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts from family members I hadn't heard from in months. Some were kind. Myra, I'm so proud of you. Some were conflicted. That must have been hard for your father. And a few were the ones I expected. He's your dad, you should forgive him. I didn't respond to those. What I noticed more was the silence. The family group chat, the one I'd never been added to, the one where Dad posted updates about my fictional debt, went quiet. Derek told me nobody had posted since the party. The chat wasn't deleted. It just died, the way things die when the person who fed them stops being trusted. The ripple effects were small but measurable. Patricia called Donna to plan the next family dinner. Not Gerald. For the first time in a decade, Thanksgiving logistics didn't route through my father's kitchen. Jim and his wife stopped showing up to Dad's Saturday golf foursome. Not dramatically. They just found other plans, week after week, until the pattern became the answer. Mrs. Garland, the neighbor, left a card in Dad's mailbox. I never learned what it said. But Dad didn't wave to her from the driveway anymore. He called me once. It was a Tuesday night, raining. You've ruined me, he said. No preamble, no hello. I let the words sit. I told the truth, Dad. What you built on top of lies, that was always going to fall. Nobody calls me anymore, Myra. Are you happy? I thought about it. Really thought. I'm not happy about that, I said. But I'm not responsible for it either. He hung up. I sat in my apartment and listened to the rain and felt something I hadn't felt in years. The specific relief of a burden that belongs to someone else. Donna sent the email on a Monday. Formal, bullet-pointed. Subject line. Outstanding funds, resolution request. She itemized everything. Her $14,200, Patricia's $600. 3 other relatives who came forward after the party. Uncle Ray with $1,200 for Myra's dental work, Cousin Lisa with $800 for Myra's winter tires, and family friend Margaret with $1,400 for Myra's student loan payment. None of it had reached me. All of it had reached Gerald. Total, $18,200. Dad didn't fight it. That surprised me. Maybe he calculated that a legal dispute would cost more, not in dollars, but in whatever was left of his reputation. He withdrew the money from his retirement savings, wrote checks, sent them within the 60-day window, each one with a terse memo, reimbursement. He wasn't bankrupt, he wasn't homeless. He still had his house, his pension, his truck. But the cushion he'd built on other people's kindness was gone. Brenda started setting her own boundaries that spring. She told Dad she didn't want him discussing her finances with anyone, not relatives, not friends, not neighbors. When he pushed back, "I'm your father. I have a right to," she interrupted him. "You have the right to be my dad, not my spokesperson." I rented the house on Maple Ridge to a young couple, the Martins, both teachers. Quiet, kind, paid on time. I didn't pick bad tenants. I didn't pick loud tenants. I picked people who reminded me of Nathan and me, just starting out, working hard, saving every dollar. Every morning when Dad looked out his kitchen window, he saw their car in the driveway. A house that used to be someone else's was now mine, and there was nothing to undo about it. That spring, I ran the numbers. Duplex, ranch, cottage. My portfolio was worth just over $400,000. I was 30 years old. Not bad for a girl who couldn't afford lunch. 2 months later, I went back to Dad's house. Not for a confrontation, not for closure. I needed a box of Mom's Christmas ornaments that was still in the attic. Porcelain angels she'd collected since before Brenda was born. I wanted them for my apartment. Dad opened the door on the second knock. He was wearing a flannel shirt and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. The house was quiet. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The quiet of a place that used to echo with control and now just echoed. He looked older. The lines around his eyes had deepened, and his shoulders sat lower, as if the scaffolding that held them up had been quietly removed. "Come in," he said. He made coffee while I climbed up to the attic. When I came down with the box, he was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 mugs. I sat across from him. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Your mother used to tell me I hold on too tight." He turned the mug in his hands. "I always thought she meant the dishes." I didn't laugh. "She meant people, Dad." He nodded, slowly. "I know. I know that now." I sipped the coffee. It was weak. He'd always made it too weak, and Mom used to add a second scoop when he wasn't looking. I didn't tell him that. I stood up and tucked the box under my arm. At the door, I stopped. "I'm not shutting the door on you," I said. "But I need you to stop lying. About me, about Brenda, about Mom. If you can do that, we can start over." Slowly. He didn't answer right away. Then he nodded, and for the first time, the nod didn't feel like a performance. It felt like a man sitting in a house that was too big for him, trying to remember how to be small. "I didn't think I was lying," he said quietly. "I thought I was protecting how I needed things to be." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But pity isn't the same as absolution, and understanding isn't the same as forgetting. "Goodbye, Dad." He lifted his hand, half a wave. I walked to my car with my mother's angels and didn't look back. I'm sitting on the porch of 4712 Maple Ridge Drive, not because I live here, the Martins do, but today I'm here doing a final walkthrough before they move in next week, checking the paint, testing the locks, making sure the porch light doesn't flicker. Nathan's beside me, coffee in hand, leaning against the railing in that easy way he has, like the world is a place where things generally work out if you show up and pay attention. I can see Dad's house from here. 47 steps to the left. His kitchen light is on. It's always on now. He spends a lot of time in that kitchen, from what Brenda tells me. She calls me every week now. Real calls, not the surface-level check-ins we used to have, where she'd ask how I was, and I'd say fine, and we'd both pretend that was enough. "Do you regret it?" Nathan asks. "Telling everyone at the party?" I think about it, not because the answer is complicated, but because the question deserves more than a reflex. "I regret that it had to happen in public," I say. "But he made it public first, every single time." Nathan nods. That's enough for him. Donna hosted the last family dinner at her house. Patricia brought the wine. Derek manned the grill. Nobody asked Gerald to carve anything. He wasn't there. Not because he was banned, but because he chose not to come. Maybe that's his version of boundaries. Maybe it's just pride. I don't know yet. The porch light works. The locks are solid. The Martins are going to love this place. I lock the front door, pocket the key, and walk toward the car. Nathan falls into step beside me. Freedom isn't about proving them wrong. It's about not needing them to say you're right. If you're listening to this, and you recognize your own father in mine, or your mother, or your brother, or whoever in your family made you feel like you were less than what you are, I want you to know something. You don't have to buy a house to prove your worth. You don't have to own 3 properties or memorize your credit score or slide keys across a dinner table in front of 40 people. That was my path. It doesn't have to be yours. What matters is the moment you stop accepting someone else's version of who you are. For me, the keys weren't the point. They were just the proof that I couldn't be narrated anymore. The real turning point happened years before the party, the night I sat in a parking lot with shaking hands and decided that I would never again let a man who didn't believe in me define what I was capable of. And if you're not there yet, that's okay. I wasn't there for 8 years. I held my mother's letter for 5 years before I opened it. I kept Donna's thank you card in a drawer for 3. I watched my father lie about me at every holiday table and said nothing. I'm not telling this story from a place of perfection. I'm telling it from the other side of a very long silence. Dad texts me sometimes now, short messages, a photo of the backyard, a weather update. He hasn't apologized. I don't think he knows how. But he's stopped lying, at least to me. And that's not forgiveness, but it might be a beginning. The Martins baked me cookies last week, by the way. Left them on the porch in a Tupperware container with a thank you note. I stood there holding warm snickerdoodles in front of a house my father said I'd never afford, and I laughed until my eyes watered. The irony was not lost on me. The best revenge isn't a house or a key or a set of receipts. It's becoming someone they can't narrate anymore. I keep Mom's letter in my wallet now, folded small, tucked behind my driver's license, where I can feel it every time I reach for something. You were always strong enough. Some days I believe it completely. Other days I have to read it again. But it's there. She made sure of that. Even from wherever she is now, she made sure. Nathan's waiting in the car. The engine's running. We're heading home. Our apartment for now. Maybe something bigger someday. Maybe one of my own properties, once the numbers make sense. I'm in no rush. I've learned that the best things I've built were built slowly, in silence, when nobody was watching. I walk past Dad's house. The kitchen light is still on. I imagine him in there, sitting at the table, drinking weak coffee, looking at his phone, wondering if anyone's going to call. Part of me wants to stop. Part of me knows that stopping right now would undo the boundary I spent 8 years building. So I keep walking. I'm 30. I own 3 houses. I have a man who sees me, a sister who's learning how to show up, an aunt who fights fair, a family that's rebuilding itself around the truth instead of around one man's need to be needed, and a father who is, very slowly, running out of stories to tell. I used to think turning 30 would feel heavy, like a door closing on the years I spent invisible. It doesn't. It feels like setting down a bag I didn't know I was carrying, like standing up straight for the first time and realizing the ceiling was never as low as someone told you it was. Nathan rolls down the window. Ready? I slide into the passenger seat. Keys in my pocket. Letter in my wallet. The whole road ahead. Ready? 30 looks good on me, but it looks even better with keys in my pocket and no one else writing the check. And that's my story. If you've ever been unseen by the person who should have believed in you the most, drop a comment and tell me. What was the moment you decided to stop letting someone else define your worth? And if you haven't reached that moment yet, you will. I believe that. Check the description for more stories like this one. I'll see you in the next one.